Today, Alex Johnson joined us on the show. He told us all about the upcoming Fantasy Sports Con, the different fantasy sports. It's not just football, baseball, and basketball. There's a lot more out there, and some of San Diego's greatest surf spots. Let's check it out. Much for tuning in to Waz Up San Diego. I am your host, Luke Wazaloo, and today I am joined by Alex Johnson, the founder of Fantasy Sports Con. Thank you so much for being here, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about Fantasy Sports Con and how you got started with it.
Yeah, well, so Fantasy Sports Con, it's a nonprofit, and it's dedicated to the education of the fantasy sports industry. And it's also a platform for its professionals to grow and promote their own charitable missions. And this will be primarily around an annual convention and then ancillary events throughout the year. And so I kind of modeled this after the San Diego Comic-Con. Obviously, being in San Diego, I work full time for an event ticketing company. So I compete with like the Eventbrite Ticketmasters of the world. And so I already work with some conventions. And I was kind of surprised when I started looking more into it that there weren't really any events that brought multiple sports together, let alone fantasy sports, which is not surprising because if you think about the timing of sports, they're all going at different times.
Different seasons, different times.
Yeah, and so I wanted to have an opportunity to get players to an event from different sports, and the best way, like I'm an avid fantasy sports fan, and so it'd be great to meet those players and interact like at Comic-Con, and so I founded it as a nonprofit following in the footsteps of San Diego Comic-Con. So we will actually be donating money, profits back to the players' charities that attend the event, and getting partners and stuff to match those donations so that we can kind of grow the impact and really help these players not only grow their brand outside of their team and outside of their sport, but also the things that they're passionate about. So they all have a foundation or have one that they're really involved with that they like. And so this is an opportunity for them to kind of help give back and have fun at an event and grow their brand, away from the team,
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of what you said too, how it's awesome to get players from all the different sports. It's almost kind of like iHeart music festivals too as well, where you got like country singers with rappers, with rock stars.
It's really hard to do. I mean, so when you think about the different seasons, so that's why as I was planning this, and I've been involved in sports and entertainment for about a decade now. So the best way we landed on June 19th through 21st at Bally's Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Awesome. The great part about this is it'll be right after the NBA Finals. So we'll have no NBA, no NFL, and no NHL. So we can have 3 of the 5 professional major sports there.
Wow.
As far as players, coaches, front office folks. And then obviously the sports personalities, the TV, radio, podcasters around not just sports, or not just fantasy, but sports in general. And then mix in some fun ones. There's a lot of other things that people are getting involved into in the fantasy sports realm. So was hoping to really be able to find a time to get all of these players, there at one time. Because if you think about other events, the next closest one might be the ESPYs, but it's a really exclusive type event. It's
Absolutely.
Not for the fans. And then you look at the draft. So like the NFL draft brought 600,000 people out to Nashville last year, but it's just football.
That's incredible.
Just football. So, the idea of bringing out football, basketball, hockey, baseball, soccer fans, and then the random sports like fantasy surfing, and there's golf, and we're joking about, fantasy bachelor and bachelorette. Picking the people
That's
who's going to
funny.
make it down. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and then even hoping to planning on wrapping in esports into it as well. So all these players are really into gaming. The fans connect with them. A player that I really love in the NFL right now is Juju Smith-Schuster, and he's got this massive brand away from the Pittsburgh Steelers and away from the NFL, and it's around the gaming, and he's got fans of him just from the gaming side of things that maybe now watch him play on the Steelers that normally wouldn't because they're a fan of that. So
Gotcha.
Wrapping in a kind of a pros versus Joes esports tournament where you'll get to play these players in person in a little tournament style at the event.
It's so true, and I can't see how fantasy sports isn't growing people's brand.
Even me I've been a crazy sports fan for most of my life, but I know third string running backs and where they went to college, yep. And I'm watching the Dolphins play the Redskins, which we would never watch, but kind of have whether you pick the game,
you got Drake on your
yeah, you got somebody, and so and so now my Sundays. I invite people over and I invest in the red zone and the Sunday ticket so that I have all of the games on and I'm watching everything. So I do think, especially with football and the same with basketball, I'm a big basketball fan, but it's hard to watch, 82 games of your team, let alone all the other ones. But when you have players on different teams, it's actually fun to throw on a game that you might not normally watch. And even baseball for me, I'm not a big baseball fan, but I've always enjoyed it. And picking players, I know way more about baseball than I ever would without watching probably 3/4 of the season.
Because you're watching stats, you're watching scores, yep. You can see the trends, and you're absolutely right. 162 games, what is it in the MLB?
In baseball. So, and then even knowing more about the players. So, following these players, Juju's a great example. I know that he recently started his Juju Smith-Schuster, the Juju Foundation. Mm-hmm. So you get to see what they're doing outside of the sport, and these are all things I wouldn't have done had I not been involved in fantasy sports.
Wow. Are there any players in particular that kind of have amazing followings other than Juju and amazing foundations?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and we're targeting a lot of them. Some of the who I'm working with now, which is really exciting, is I met here in San Diego, who lives here, is Hall of Famer Andre Reed from the Buffalo Bills. And he's had a great following. He's done a lot since his time in the NFL, and he recently started he's had a foundation for a while called the Andre Reed Foundation and the Reed 83 program, to where he helps with literacy within children, really setting them up for the future and incentivize them, gets them tickets to games, and if they hit milestones and
if they read X amount of books,
if they read, the way, as they hit those goals, like they get rewarded. And so we're excited to work with him, not only have him out there at the convention, but working with his foundation, of giving them tickets so that they will be able to use that to come see all these other players. But then you look at the guys like, Drew Brees, he's lives out in North County. And so he's huge within, charities. You look at like JJ Watt and all these players, like I said, most professional players have some charitable, mission that they're involved with, whether it's their own or something they're passionate about. And we love that. And so instead of picking one thing that I cared a lot about, or maybe our board or some friends and stuff that we wanted, it's like, we'll support the players and what they have. And the goal is to, hopefully write some big checks to 3, 4, 10 different charities. That's awesome. To these players, and, give them more of a reason to come out than just build their brand and make some money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, San Diego, where do you live in San Diego right now?
I live by Kate Sessions Park in North PB. It's beautiful, about a mile from the beach, and not too close to all the craziness, but there if we want to get around.
Close enough to go down the hill.
But I've been out here for 2 years. I love San Diego. My grandma's in La Mesa, so really love the town. And yeah, being here, had I not been to, Comic-Con, and I met Andre Reed at the opening of the theater box. So just being here it really helped with the stepping stones to really get this convention up and going.
Is there any particular area in San Diego that you were just drawn to? Because I know originally from Iowa.
I'm originally from a small farm in Iowa, and I actually lived in Austin, Texas for 3 years before moving here. San Diego's basically Austin with a beach. Like, the people are great, a lot to do outdoors and whatnot. Really, it was, I came here for a job, but I already knew I loved it, and really what drew me obviously is the beach. I try to surf a couple times a week if I can, and the people are great, and it's so cliche out here in San Diego, but you really can't beat the weather. I got to go back to Iowa for Christmas, and it'll be like -3 degrees and pouring down snow, and I might get stuck. That's always something you worry about.
I have friends in Boulder right now, and it's just dumping. It's freezing, and we're out here in shorts.
It's literally like almost 70 degrees and sunny today.
Hot.
So yeah, it's a rough life out here.
Yeah, we gotta turn the AC on when we're driving around.
Exactly.
Any particular favorite surf spots in San Diego?
Just because of proximity, I go to Tourmaline a lot, just because it's right down the road for me. So I really like it there. We'll do Scripps, La Jolla a lot as well. But yeah, I stick to the North PB right there. The people out there are great. It's not, I've gotten better and better, but you cut people off. You're not going to start a fight like you might at Wind and Sea or down in Sunset Cliffs and stuff. So everybody out there is really cool and
not as territorial.
And it's just a fun spot to bring new people. I bring people all the time that are visiting out there. So
absolutely. And I'd be that guy who probably cut some people off. I just love being in the water.
Yeah. Yeah, and even with the suit out here, it's not too cold in the water, and you stay pretty active. So it's a lot more fun going out working out on the ocean at sunset or at sunrise than hitting the gym maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if somebody wanted to attend your first Fantasy Con, you said it is at Bally's in Vegas,
Yep.
June?
So it'll be June 19th through 21st. It's Father's Day weekend, so we're excited about that. So we can either invite your family out or, get your dad a ticket to it. But tickets will be launching. Our goal is before Christmas. And right now the best way is just to follow along on social media. So it's just Fantasy Sports Con on Facebook and Instagram, and Fan Sports Con on Twitter. And the website's fantasysportscon.org. So we'll be posting new headliners, the talent that are coming, the athletes that we're working on bringing out, new partners as their launch, and then all of the programming for the event. So we're really excited about all the stuff that we're planning. There'll be an opening night kind of party at Bally's Pool from 8 to 11, and then an after party at one of the properties for Caesars who we're working with. And so we're putting all that programming around. So not only panels and sports activations and, getting photo ops and stuff with the players, but, a lot of ancillary things. And then the goal will be to do individual sports throughout the year. So going back to Vegas in the end of August to do your fantasy football draft.
So right after the season's over.
Well, preferably right before the season. So like at the end of August, right before the season starts, you go to Vegas and bring your friends out to do a draft party. And same thing for basketball, like LA or New York. Coming out with your friends, doing a draft, meeting maybe some analysts and Hall of Famers and things like that. But trying to do ancillary ones per sport. And then even hopefully doing something fun here in San Diego or Orange County around the surfing, now that I found out that we have fantasy surfing. So
I had no idea. And the Fantasy Bachelorette, that was...
I know,
that
right?
kind of
Isn't that
blew my
hilarious?
mind. How do you even get a Fantasy Bachelorette
Oh, man.
team?
It's crazy. So, yeah, I had an ex-girlfriend and her family played, and it was hilarious. And, yeah, you just pick the contestants and each week who's going to make it to the next level, and you get points obviously the farther you go, and you pick people at the beginning who you think is going to make it the whole way. So so each week you're invested, and sadly probably wouldn't watch the show
hours
without
at it.
but yeah, it's crazy how intense you get at it too. Like I would obviously never watch the show, but when you're watching it you're like, Carl, what are you doing? Keep your stuff together. So
pull it together. I love it. How did you start and come up with the idea of Fantasy Sports Con?
So as I was mentioning before, I work for an event ticketing company, but so I've worked with a lot of festivals and events, and then been getting into the convention side of things and being able to go to San Diego Comic-Con. But I was sitting around one night, actually last October, and was tinkering with my fantasy football and basketball lineups because we had both sports going on at the same time. And there were no games on though. And so I realized I just spent like an hour and a half reading and researching and playing this, and I was a little embarrassed of myself. I was like, wow, I just wasted a lot of time on this. And but then I kind of started thinking about, I was like, my friends that I play with, they're crazy like me. They're big fantasy nerds. And I know, like, I see it's grown so much, other people talking about it, and you really can't get through a single broadcast about sports and even news when they're talking about sports where they're like, oh, that's going to affect a fantasy team later or whatnot, and they've gotten rid of like the bottom line now, and it's a fantasy ticker telling you how much people have scored throughout the week. So that part was, so I was like, okay, well, there's got to be some sort of events for this, and I looked it up and I kind of researched for a while, and other than finding conferences that are more for the industry folks, so people like me who work in the industry or wanting to do trade shows or things like that, there wasn't a lot for the fans. And, I'd found one that had attempted to go to Vegas 3 years ago, but sadly the NFL didn't have a gambling policy at the time, and so they were unable to do that event, which was great for us now this year that, they've solidified that policy where, the players can be in casinos, they can gamble, they just can't gamble on sports. And that makes it a lot easier, because before that was all very, up in the air, and so they weren't able to come do an event like this. And
what do you mean they weren't able to go to casinos in general? Or?
In general, it was like frowned upon, so there could have been repercussions. So they all do it. They all go. We know it. I mean, if you watch
they
Ballers,
want to go play blackjack. Or go play...
there were all those things, but because it wasn't a convention around the sport, around football specifically, they decided they weren't okay with it. And so from what I've read and when I was researching all this, so I haven't talked to them or either party, but so because of that, that was a bummer. They weren't able to do it, and it sounded like a lot of players were excited about it and wanted to do it. But now with that policy opening it up and doing it, I had explored looking at doing Los Angeles, doing it here in San Diego because we've had such a success with San Diego Comic-Con. Other major sports markets, and I did some polling around, asking fans and threw it on social media and friends, and yeah, we identified Las Vegas as really the best option for us because it's a great city for people to fly in from. People Absolutely. Go all year. It's very inexpensive to fly in. It's already been a sports hub. Boxing's been huge there for forever, and they've had major sporting events there. And then with recently them having the Vegas Golden Knights, as them signing board, and then also the Oakland Raiders are now moving to Las Vegas next year. So the goal is working with those two parties to not only launch and build excitement around the two local sports, but what's going to be great about those two teams those two teams and franchises, especially football, is they're going to be a hub for away games. Like when Denver comes to play Oakland, Denver fans are going to fly to Vegas, and they're going to tailgate and have a good time and do all this. And
it's an excuse to go to Vegas.
It's an excuse to go to Vegas. And so we already identified Vegas and it's already blowing up even more of a sports hub than it was. So it just made it a great location to hold the annual convention. And then, like I mentioned before, we have the opportunity to do the individual sports in other markets to really spread the love. And my goal is really to grow this, whether it's 5-10 years down the road, having an annual convention in London, which is the global sports hub, and soccer is huge, and cricket and all these things that are not necessarily as popular in the United States, but popular worldwide. And so growing it to that level to where, maybe we're not like San Diego Comic-Con. It all just started from wanting to really create, I believe that, there are other fans out there like me that are just as crazy that, we'd love to not only talk about with our friends about our teams. I travel a lot for work, and I'm at the bar and I'm seeing, people, guys and girls on their phone tinkering with their team. And I'm just sitting over there like, who you got tonight? And start talking. And they're like, oh, well, I'm in this league. And they go on down this rabbit hole, and they love to talk about it. And they love to talk about strangers. So I wanted to create a community and really an event where we can bring those people together to brag about our teams. And the same thing as me, like I always dreamed of meeting some of these players and not just rooting for them on TV, but having them all together one. And especially for folks like me, I mean, most people who play fantasy play more than one fantasy sport. It's not just specific to the like football or baseball or basketball. Like they're playing each, and there's not a month that goes by that I'm not playing in a league, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, and these other like smaller ones. Yeah. Even golf pools, every major, there's different golf pools where you get to pick players and, through the top, 100 people or whatnot, and you get points based on their success throughout the tournament. So it's really grown into a lot of that, and my goal was to build that community and bring everybody together to enjoy it.
It is a huge phenomenon, and just for myself personally, we have the WhatsApp thread where everybody's on it, and I put mute on it because I had a crazy day and I unmuted, and it's like 250 messages coming through about all these different things and lineups, and people love it.
And it's created like a whole nother industry within the gambling piece. So it's great that the leagues and we've made gambling legal, so they're taxing it, and it's definitely a lot safer for people who have issues because it's more out in the forefront and maybe not necessarily dealing with bookies all the time and whatnot. No breaking kneecaps hopefully.
Well, not the best,
not the best. So, but even with like daily fantasy. So being able to play per game and have money on it, there's a huge piece there, but. It's really grown a huge audience. And with fantasy sports, I mean, it's grown so significantly. I mean, this was ultimately one of the reasons why I decided to pull the trigger on it. And just like, I knew that my friends and I knew that a lot of people liked it, but I didn't really know how much until I did the research. And since from between 2010 and 2017, it went from 32 million to 59 million. So, and I don't have numbers for the last 2 years, so I can only imagine it's grown even more significantly for how fast it's growing. So the people are there, and that's just the U.S. and Canada. So the people are there, they're playing, they want something like this, and the idea of bringing it all together and having those activations and having people to nerd out with, just like in other industries like Comic-Con and things like that.
Absolutely. It's bringing everybody together and kind of getting that community, like-minded people. And I think it's brilliant. And the fact that you're bringing in all the different athletes too as well. A, getting them exposure, B, just people being able to strategize with each other about.
Yeah, it's great because especially with athletes, so we know that sports athletes' careers are short. Like the average careers are, 3 to 5 years for the normal players, but obviously we see the quarterbacks that are lasting 10, 15 plus, like Tom Brady, all that, and that's something. But there's also a bigger element to not only just growing their brand outside of the sport because it's short. And capitalizing on that awareness now, it's giving these athletes a bigger platform so that when they're done with sports, that they have this club and community that they can come back and connect with every year at the convention, and still continue to grow that brand and especially those things that they're passionate about. They're all trying to help their communities, and we want to be a part of that.
Love it. I love it. I love it. If you ever have any questions for Alex, again, at Fantasy Sports Con. On all social media platforms.
At Fantasy Sports Con, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then www.fantasysportscon.org.
Absolutely. Make sure to check out, go visit on June 19th to the 21st at Bally's in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me.
Love it. Today we had Alex Johnson on the show, learned all about the upcoming Fantasy Sports Con, which is going to be in Vegas on June 19th to the 21st. If you'd like more details about how to get tickets, check out at Fantasy Sports Con or fantasysportscon.org. Please feel free to email me at wazupsandiego@gmail.com. Thanks, and I will see you next week.